you absolutely shouldn't say in your essay, I'm doing this because I want a free ticket to, you
Yeah.
know, X country, Paris or,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Italy or
Uh-huh.
whatnot, right?
Not getting it.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're really looking for your own personal journey, your own personal
Mhm.
passion. Um, why you?
Welcome to another episode of The New College Mindset. I'm your host, Jerica, and today we have on the show Leland Lazarus, Associate Director of National Security Policy at Florida International University, a prior U.S. diplomat, and a renowned China Latin expert. But back in the day, Leland was just like you, a college student with dreams of working overseas and needing the paid opportunity to do it. That's when he heard about the Fulbright Teaching Assistantship, which paid for him to work in Panama, the country of his heritage, and gave him the start to his amazing international career. If you have a passion to work with other cultures overseas, but just can't figure out the funding, Leland's been there, and this episode's for you. Let's get started. So without further ado, I would love to welcome Leland to the New College Mindset. Welcome, Leland. How are you this morning?
Jerica, thank you so much for this opportunity. Really excited.
Yes, me too. Like beyond. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself as well as your favorite college experience?
Well, I'm originally from New York, but both my parents are from Panama. And when I was little, I learned about the country of my heritage, but I never had the opportunity to actually go. And I constantly was asking my parents, "Hey, is there an opportunity? Let's go back." But from their generation, they were thinking, "Hey, we left Panama. We want to stay in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you want to go back?" And so it was actually in college where I actually had the first opportunity to go back. Actually, not through the Fulbright initially. It was through another program called Learning Enterprises, where college students spend a summer in a Latin American country to teach English in a rural area. So I ended up spending an entire summer teaching English out in El Interior, the interior of Panama. It was an incredible experience,
Wow.
absolutely life-changing. Yeah.
So you've told us you're Afro-Latino, which I think is super awesome. And what did you study in college and what's your favorite college experience?
Yeah, well, I studied international relations with a focus on both China and Latin America. But I think my most memorable college experience is actually not academics. It was actually through music. I love to sing. I was in choir and a cappella
And
and
he's a
everything
great
like that.
singer, guys. He's a great singer.
Uh,
So, you know.
I've been out the game. I've been out the game for a while, but
But warm it back up.
in college, I was part of an a cappella group. It's called the Jabberwocks, and every year we would actually go on an overseas trip to perform, and it was absolutely amazing. Like my freshman year, we went to Hong Kong. Then my sophomore year, we went to Europe, so the UK, France, and Sicily.
Man.
And then junior year, there was sort of an issue. We were going to go to Japan, but then it was 2011, the Fukushima tsunami had happened. And so the country was essentially shut down. So we didn't have a chance to go. But then my senior year, we went back to Europe. And I think my most memorable experience was when we had gone back to Paris. It was basically my last performance with the group, and we were up on the Eiffel Tower, surrounding each other in a circle, singing one of our traditional songs while the Eiffel Tower was flashing beautiful lights in the evening. It's one of my most sort of poignant memories for sure.
Yeah, no, I can see it. Like you painted such a beautiful picture, and to have that be the culmination of everything. I want to talk a little bit about that love for the arts, and also, you have martial arts and just arts in general, music and all of that, and your love for international relations and international studies. Some of our students are pulled in two directions. How have you been able to kind of look at your love for both of those things and bring them together? Your love for the arts, but also your love for international relations and studies. Is there an intersection there for you? How have you been able to navigate those two things?
I think there's absolutely an intersection. I think one absolutely feeds the other.
Hmm.
If you think about different cultures, they may have different languages, different ways of doing business
Mhm.
and operating, but in many ways, music, um, movies, the arts is really a language that can cross bridges, right? And can cross
Mhm.
cultures.
Mhm.
And so I've always found that as a really incredible tool in order to really build those connections, both when I was in college, but then when I was also in the professional field as a U.S. diplomat in the State Department, and then eventually in the Department of Defense. Always being able to either mention a song from the other culture,
Mhm.
or mentioning an artist or a famous book was always a
Mhm.
great way to build those personal connections.
Yeah, no, and I think for our first and second gen students, this is a great reminder that those two things can marry together. Those things can be together, and it can open doors that some may not be able to have because they don't have that specific talent. And a lot of times, the arts, you don't need a language. It's its own language, and it's its language
Right.
across everywhere. So I think
Right.
that's super encouraging to hear. So, what I want to do now is ask you these two questions that we've asked all of our guests. And it requires you to think back to your time in college. And the first question is, what advice would you give to a first or second generation college student that is looking to graduate employed? So, perhaps things they need to be thinking about or doing that you wish somebody had told you, advice on how to graduate employed as a first or second generation college student.
Wow. Um, well, I would say the first thing is start joining professional networks now.
Okay.
You don't have to wait until you're actually employed to start getting into these networks.
Hmm.
And there's been a proliferation of these professional groups, I think specifically in the past like 5 years or so.
Hmm.
There's the National Association for Black Engagement in Asia, NABIA.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's BPIA, the Black Professionals in International
Hmm.
Affairs.
Hmm.
There are various um, women in international affairs
Hmm.
organizations, and there's no age limit to join them, right?
Hmm.
You can join them now, and they have a bunch of in-person and online professional development programs.
Hmm.
Start going to them.
Hmm.
Start networking online. If you see somebody in that network who you think has a similar professional trajectory, reach out to them on LinkedIn.
Hmm. Hmm.
Don't be shy. Start really doing that now.
Yeah, yeah. So not holding yourself back as far
Hmm.
as thinking I need to be older or I need to have graduated to participate in these networks. And so you think that that was something that was missing when you were matriculating through college? Was there anything else that you would say, hey, this is really good advice if a student's like, hey, I want to graduate employed. Let's say they want to do it in international affairs. Is there something
Hmm.
else that you say that would have been helpful to hear for a student?
APSIA,
Yeah,
right?
apps, yeah.
So
Mhm, mhm,
Association for Public Schools and International Affairs, APSIA.
mhm, mhm,
And they have this really interesting resource um, for diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's
mhm,
basically a list of different international exchange programs that are available
hmm,
to high school students, but then
hmm,
also folks start college, folks in their early careers. And I'd invite them to go on that list and see all the different programs available to them.
mhm,
All right, that's one more thing too. I feel like it was really serendipity for me to find out about the Fulbright, and then by extension the Rhodes Scholarship
mhm,
and some others, right? Or Boren or Gilman. But I wish that somebody had told me from high school, right?
mhm, mhm,
Where that I knew that these programs existed, so that then I could have more strategically focus my classes or focus my extracurricular activities in order to um, really make sure to take advantage of those programs.
Yeah, no, and I think that I'm going to definitely link this in the show notes because, like you said, and what we tell all our listeners is like, hey, you hear about something you never heard of before. Make sure you share it because there are a lot of people out there that are just like how you were, how I was. We didn't know. That's
Right.
one of the reasons why one of the foundational pillars for the new college mindset is to help people find out about these opportunities. And so I think that's really good advice for students to be thinking about. So now what I want to do is jump into the main show, which is talking about the Fulbright scholarships. And I want to ask you, what is the difference between the Fulbright Teaching Assistant program and the others? Because I think when you look on the website, it's very confusing. I'm over here saying I was confused. I'll raise my hand. I think a lot of our firsts I can just do. We're all confused. So, what's the difference between the Fulbright scholarships? Let's just start there.
Yeah. So it's confusing because there are so many different Fulbright programs for different um, types of people in different times in their career as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the main one is the English Teaching Assistantship and the Research Fellowship.
Hmm.
And so that's usually for US citizens. You're just about to finish up your time in college. So you apply your senior year, and it requires an application, a
Mm-hmm.
statement of
Mm-hmm.
interest, your grades, and so your resume, and then also letters of recommendation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you can choose to either do an English teaching assistantship, where you
Mm-hmm.
go and you basically spend about a year teaching English in the country where you choose,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or you do a research program where you basically get linked up with a university in a country abroad to carry out a research project. It could be a follow on to your senior thesis that you were working on,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or a topic that you have really passionate about
Mm-hmm.
and just didn't have the time and the resources to carry it. It's really all up to you. And really, the whole goal of the Fulbright program is to increase mutual understanding between people in the United States and people overseas. Right? It was basically created by a senator named William Fulbright, who was around during the time after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole
Mm-hmm.
idea was, my goodness, there was so much chaos
Mm-hmm.
in the world after World War II. And so, ideally, if we could create a program where American citizens serve as citizen diplomats, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and proactively go out into the world, learn about other cultures, learn about other people, and vice versa, have folks from around the world come to the United States to study and learn about our culture, that would help to foster mutual understanding and hopefully decrease the likelihood of conflict.
Yeah, no, and I think that that story and that the reasoning behind it is so needed today. You know, more mutual understanding, more friendships and relationships that have a seed now, and then it can grow into so many beautiful things later. And so, I want to take it a little bit personal for you.
Mhm.
Why the Fulbright Teaching Assistantship? Like, who told you about it? What made you decide to say, you know what, I want to do the Fulbright Teaching Assistantship?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, Fulbright, there are thousands of Fulbrighters who go abroad every year.
Hmm.
Um, but it is kind of a competitive process, right? And
Hmm.
so I remember my senior year, I, um, well, even before my senior year, I was trying to learn about different international exchange programs out there. Obviously, I had the option to start um, with a job right out of college,
Hmm.
or to do something called Teach for China,
Hmm.
which was kind of a similar
Hmm.
program where you kind of go out into a rural area and
Mm-hmm.
you teach over in China.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course like the Rhodes
Mm-hmm.
Scholarship and others. Um, and there was a international exchange advisor at my alma mater at Brown, and her name was Linda Dunleavy. And I'll never
Yeah.
forget her name because when I first met Linda Dunleavy, she sort of sat me down, like wanted to hear about my own kind of aspirations and my academic interests up to that point. And after she heard about my passion for international affairs and also my desire to like actually spend more of a significant amount of time in the country of my heritage,
Mm-hmm.
Panama,
Mm-hmm.
she was like,
Mm-hmm.
"You got to apply to Fulbright." I was like, "Okay." So I did that, and she kind of helped me through the process too. This is kind of the how you write the essay, and
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
I've spent multiple rounds, right? Writing it, tweaking it, sharing it with her, sharing it with other mentors. So it takes a while, right? It definitely takes a
Yeah.
while. It's not one of those things where it's 2 weeks before the deadline. You can kind of
Mm-hmm.
put it in, right? It
Yeah.
takes a long time and preparation. Um, but it was absolutely the life-changing event for me.
When I hear these stories of people like taking time just to share, it just makes me super happy because she changed your life, and I
Yeah.
think that is super awesome. So shout out Linda. Shout out to you. Now you talked a little bit about the essay portion, and I know a lot of
Uh-huh.
our students that are saying, okay, I'm interested. Leland is piquing my interest in this. Can you talk a little bit about the tips that you would give for someone that's crafting this essay? You've already alluded to don't do this 2 weeks before.
Hmm.
But what other advice would you give for someone that's trying to craft this Fulbright teaching assistantship essay?
First and foremost, talk to Fulbright alumni.
Okay.
And no matter where you are in the country, there's a Fulbright alumni chapter in all the major
Hmm.
cities
Hmm.
around the country. And you can find folks who just finished their Fulbright. You can find folks who are 5, 10, 15, 20 years removed from it.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
getting that um, that background and um, learning from others who've already done the program is, I think, a perfect kind of first step. These alumni are always willing to talk to prospective Fulbright scholars.
hmm,
So that's absolutely a great resource. Second is to go on the Fulbright website itself
mhm,
and start looking at, you know, um, countries that you might be interested in going to,
hmm,
right? Because ultimately you have to choose specifically which country you want to go to.
mhm,
Um, and some programs might be a little bit different than others in different countries. So getting a sense of the similarities and differences between different programs in different countries is also a huge help. Um, and third is just continue to really stay in touch with both the international exchange advisor in your
mhm,
university, but
mhm,
also the State Department's Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs, ECA, because um, ECA and the Fulbright program, right, which is run out of the State Department, they organize a series of information sessions during the sort of Fulbright season, right? So I think every October is when the Fulbright deadline is,
mhm,
and throughout the year, the State Department will host a series of virtual info sessions where they sort of tell you this is the Fulbright program, this is the differences between the English teaching one, the research one.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
they'll have alumni come and talk and share their experiences. And so that's a great resource as well.
Yeah. And so if, let's say, people have done that, when you were thinking back, I know it's just a while ago, was there like a an essay prompt or something that kind of got you twisted, or was it more just like you just had to sit down and take the time to write it out, but the essays were pretty straightforward for you in your opinion?
I think the essays were pretty straightforward, but they're always looking for not just somebody who wants to just travel abroad, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, you absolutely shouldn't say in your essay, I'm doing this because I want a free ticket to,
Yeah.
you know, X country, Paris
Uh-huh,
or,
uh-huh, uh-huh.
Italy or
Not
whatnot,
getting
right?
it.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're really looking for your own personal journey, your
Mhm.
own personal passion. Um, why you, right? And and really, how will this opportunity, um, how will it help further your professional journey?
Now, I know for a lot of our first and second gen students, the key is the funding. So I want to take some time to talk about the funding. How does it work? Because a lot of students would be applying right in their senior year, trying to land this right after they graduate. Are you going to be broke? Like, how does the Fulbright work when it comes to funding? Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that?
They pay for your round trip flight,
Okay.
right, to and from the country. They also pay for um, it's called a midpoint break,
Hmm.
and that's basically halfway through your time. They organize basically a trip for all the Fulbrighters in a certain region to
Hmm.
come together and spend, I want to say, a week together.
Hmm.
Um, and it was probably in a country that's sort of central to everybody.
Mhm, mhm,
So, for example, for me, when I did my English teaching assistantship in Panama, we had our midpoint break in Peru, and it was awesome because we basically I got the chance to meet with other Fulbrighters throughout all Latin America. We all were there. We spent the week in Peru in order to get to know each other, share, what are our frustrations, what are our best practices. We got some sort of additional training as well, right? Because um, again, especially if you're teaching English, you might not actually um, be an educator, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so, they'll have sort of professionals tell you some tips and tricks on how to
Hmm.
really teach and command a
Mhm,
class,
mhm, mhm,
and um, and it was a really cool experience, and it was also rejuvenating, right? Because
hmm,
when you're there day in day out,
mhm.
the grind can be tough, right?
Yeah.
And not everybody's Fulbright experience is the same. I haven't heard of one Fulbright experience which was
Mhm,
exactly the same.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
Some Fulbrighters might be teaching elementary school students, some high school, some
mhm,
college.
mhm.
Um, there might be teaching different facets of English,
Yeah.
and so it's cool to hear various experiences as well.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's good. So they pay for that, and then while you're in country, are they giving you a salary? How does that work,
Yes.
funding wise?
Yep. So while you're in country, they also give you a monthly stipend,
Okay.
and that stipend is it's I think different based on each
Mhm,
country,
mhm,
but it is enough to pay for your housing every
mhm,
month and to have food, right? And
mhm,
even enough
mhm,
left over to even do some trips around the country when you have
mhm.
some free time. So make sure to take advantage of that as well, right? Don't just sort of
Yeah.
stay in your area.
Mhm,
Um, yes, the main job is to teach at the school or university that you're
mhm,
assigned
mhm,
to do, or if you're a researcher, to do your research at that university. But also take the opportunity to really immerse yourself in the culture, really
mhm.
learn the language, because that's also a key part of the Fulbright experience.
Yeah, having that exchange. And I think
Hmm.
this is a perfect segue to talk a little bit about your day to day experience. If you think back to your time, you're getting off the plane, you're landing in the country. What was your day to day experience being in Panama and experiencing that as a Fulbright?
Well, I remember getting there the first day.
Hmm.
I was at the University of Panama, and the person who was supposed to be my POC, I guess she might have forgotten that I was going to be coming that day. And so it was very much like, oh, hi, you're here. Um, Students, this is going to be the guy from the United States, uh, and we'll find something for you to do, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so you kind of had to make your your own schedule, if you will. Um, and I would say that most Fulbright experiences are not like that, right? Some Fulbright programs in other countries are extremely organized. You know, they know exactly when you're coming in, and so on and so forth. Um, but the the benefit is you got to find. You're going back to the whole idea of like finding your people, right? You got to find a local professor or teacher um, who you really gravitate to and who's willing to mentor you and really kind of use your talents and skills in the classroom, right? And so for me, I'm grateful to her even to this day. Professor Gloria Ho.
Hmm.
She was the director of the English department,
Hmm.
and she was actually also a Fulbright alum.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Of course, she did it from Panama to the United
Yeah.
States, right?
Yeah. Full circle though. It's crazy.
But yeah, yeah. And so she very much took me under her wing, and she had me teach her language conversation class.
Okay. Hmm.
Gave me just enough guidance, but
Hmm.
also just enough leeway to be creative and sort of create the curriculum and really engage the students in my own way. And I was just to this day really, really grateful um, for her for doing that. But the day to day would be you teach maybe a conversation class in the morning for about
Hmm.
an hour and a half, and maybe a conversation class in the afternoon as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
You're also encouraged to do a lot of um, extracurricular activities, right? So
Okay.
I led a language group in the
Hmm.
afternoon as well, right?
Mhm.
Where um, students can kind of just come and we choose a certain topic and then
Mhm.
either do cool activities or organize a debate.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I would also do culture days or culture nights where, let's say, Halloween was coming up, right? Or
Mhm.
Thanksgiving was coming up.
Hmm.
I would organize an event so that the students would know this is an important U.S. holiday, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, there may or may not be a picture on the internet of me dressed up like Michael Jackson for
What?
a Halloween one.
Exactly.
uh,
Very much the cultural exchange going on right
that's
there.
right. But it was funny too because you kind of find out about the stereotypes or
Mhm.
views that people might have
Yeah.
of the United States, right? And so I'll never forget. It was actually one of the faculty who came up to me and was like, "Yeah, so um, how come you don't walk around with a cowboy hat and cowboy boots?" And I'm like, "I'm from New York. I don't
Yeah.
own any of that, right?" Or they were like, because obviously Panama has like its own national sort of
Yeah.
dance, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the women dress up in the beautiful pollera, which is the multicolor,
Yeah.
beautiful dress,
Mhm.
and sort of a beautiful tiara as well, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And basically, like every household, when you're a kid, you kind of own that. Uh,
Mhm.
and you do the traditional dance during Independence Day and things like that.
Mm.
And so they thought that the U.S. traditional dance was like country line dancing. And they're like, all right, so when are you going to teach us country line dancing? And I'm like, I don't know.
And they have, I'm not doing it.
Right, right. But it's just a great example of just the differences in culture and the breaking down those kinds of stereotypes as well, right?
I think this is really interesting because I wanted to talk a little bit about sometimes people do go back to the place where their family is from, their heritage is from on these with these programs. How was it for you being a Afro Latino, being from Panama, like being like heritagely from Panama and being there now as a Fulbright? What was that experience like for you? How was that in case some of our students may want to do something similar?
It was an incredible personal journey for me because
Mhm.
when I was young, um, I felt like I didn't belong in either the African American or the
Mhm.
Latino camp,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I have a name where you wouldn't know that I'm
Yeah.
Latino. Um, when folks look at me, they're just like, okay, he's Black
Yeah.
American, right?
Yep.
And I
Yep.
am,
Yep.
and I
Mhm.
very much am.
Yeah.
However, I did grow up, learning or eating, Panamanian cuisine, right?
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
dancing salsa, right? Or
Mhm. Mhm.
my mom is a Spanish speaker, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I was very much familiar with the culture. And so for me, going to Panama and actually spending a significant amount of time there through the Fulbright was great because I felt like finally I was surrounded by my people.
Mm.
I was surrounded by folks who, looked just like me,
Mhm. Mhm.
and obviously we're steeped in the same culture. Um, but it was also an opportunity for me to uh, not just improve my Spanish, but also like learn the local Panamanian dialect,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
the Panamanian phrases and so on and so forth, which I wasn't connected to when I was in the
Yeah.
U.S. And it also made the experience much more personal. It
Mhm.
also um, made me really empathize with my students,
Yeah.
um, and made me want to also make sure that they had the same opportunity, right? In the same way that I had
Mhm.
this Fulbright exchange opportunity, that they would have the same opportunity to go to the U.S. Unfortunately, the University of Panama at that time didn't really have a study abroad program where the
Mhm.
students who were learning English could actually then go to the
Mhm.
U.S. And so I worked with the U.S. Embassy there, the Professor Ho, who I'd mentioned before,
Mhm. Mhm.
a university in the U.S., which was Murray State University in Kentucky,
Hmm. Hmm.
in order to really create an exchange program.
Hmm.
And with our efforts, we created something called the Dream Scholarship, where every year Panamanian students go over to Murray State in Kentucky and they spend a
Wow.
semester or a year
Mhm.
um, learning English, right? Really immersing themselves in
Yeah.
American culture. Um, and I think that was very much based on the incredible Fulbright experience.
Yeah, no, and I think having that connection, being heritagely from there and going back and seeing things and realizing, the privilege that you have and then saying, what can I do with that
Right.
to make this space better for someone that could have been me.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
could have been on the other side.
Exactly.
And I think that's the beautiful thing and the fact that you created this scholarship um and it's helped so many students is really awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about another pain point that some first and second gen students have expressed when it comes to Fulbright, and that's the housing. So how did you go about solving the housing conundrum, figuring out where you're going to be? when you landed there? What tips would you have for someone that's trying to go about finding housing for their Fulbright experience?
Yeah, I would. So there's an app. There's actually a Fulbrighter app. You can
Okay.
download it. And so once somebody gets the Fulbright,
Mm-hmm.
you join that Fulbrighter app, and then you can find a group within that app of folks, alumni who um, lived or did the exact same program
Mm-hmm.
in the country that you're going to, and
Hmm.
you can reach out to them and say, "Hey, where did you live? Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where are the
Mm-hmm.
different neighborhoods?" And I think they would provide great advice, right? Like sort of they'll know the location, they'll know the good
Mm-hmm.
sort of price points. Um, the university, reaching out to the university that you're going to be working in,
Okay.
and again, each person is set up with a specific sort of point of contact, and that point of contact should be helping in terms
Mm-hmm.
of finding housing and so on and so forth. Um, you can also reach out to the U.S. Embassy in that country
Okay.
because ultimately it's the embassy's public affairs office
Mm-hmm.
that basically administers the Fulbright program,
Mm-hmm.
and there is some local staff member of which Fulbright is in their portfolio. They would also be able to help in terms of finding housing, and if they don't know, they absolutely would be able to identify other Fulbright alumni who would be able to help.
Yeah, no, I think those are some ideas I haven't heard before because the app, I didn't know there was a Fulbright app. And yeah, I think a lot of students get a little nervous, like, okay, I'm going overseas and I got to find housing and how does that work? And, there's not a dedicated person, but these three things that you mentioned are really great. And what would you say? I kind of hear it in our conversation today, but I want you to kind of talk a little bit about it, the characteristics of a good Fulbright. So if you have these characteristics, you probably cut out for the Fulbright. Do you have any thoughts on some good characteristics students should have?
Are you curious about the world?
Hmm.
Are you comfortable with um, being creative and kind of carving out your own um, schedule and your own mission,
Hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
As I said before, not one Fulbright is experience is like the other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, there are some folks who really go above and beyond, right? You're there for the main mission again of either teaching or doing the research project, but um, Fulbrighters consistently go above and beyond that and really immerse themselves in the community. They
Mm-hmm.
get to know the real needs of the community and then
Mm-hmm.
actively contribute to that.
Mm-hmm.
That can be in the form of organizing professional development programs for your
Hmm.
students.
Mm-hmm.
Resume
Mm-hmm.
writing,
Mm-hmm.
organizing kind of virtual pen pals.
Hmm.
Maybe if they want to have even more practice with a native speaker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because your
Mm-hmm.
time is limited, and then you become
Yeah.
sort of the resident native
Yeah.
speaker at the school or the university, and so everybody wants
Mm-hmm.
to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe organizing a pen pal, a virtual pen pal system where they
Mm-hmm.
can connect with Americans who maybe want to learn Spanish or want to learn, the language in the country that you're in.
I think that being able that flexibility, yeah, being
Hmm.
comfortable with kind of like the unknown, I think.
Hmm.
Can you tell us the funniest moment? I always like asking this question. The funniest moment that you had while you were there as a Fulbright, or a moment that made you like die laughing because it was so hilarious. I feel as we travel the world, we have a lot of these moments. So, can you tell our listeners maybe a funny moment or something that just made you laugh a lot while you were there as a Fulbright?
And this isn't sort of directly connected to the Fulbright, but it is connected to that um, that scholarship program that I mentioned
Yeah.
before, right? Because it started, right? We started it during my Fulbright, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And so we had selected, the 5 students from the university who were going to be the inaugural students to go
mm-hmm.
to Kentucky on their exchange program. I was so excited, um, and I completely kind of forgot that the change in temperature was going to be so drastic. Um, they had arrived in Kentucky not just during winter, but during the polar vortex.
What?
Um, and so, yeah, sure, they brought like sweaters and stuff like that, but what they really needed was like, like Canada Goose level, you know, big coats because it was the cold. It was like negative degrees Fahrenheit. And
Man.
again, obviously Panama is like, 80s, 90s.
Yeah. It's nice.
So they came to the US and they had a rude awakening for sure. I'm sure they were thinking, damn you, Leland, like what was going on? Why did you
Exactly.
send us here? Right?
It's going to be amazing. My dreams are going to come true. You're like, what the
Right.
actual heck is
Right.
this?
Yeah. Polar vortex
Yeah.
and a bunch of snow. So they really got like the complete opposite
Yes.
experience in the US.
Welcome to America. No, and as we start learning this plane, I want to take you back to your time at the airport, and then also your time on the plane coming home. What was the difference between the Leland that went to Panama for the Fulbright and the Leland that came back? What was the difference in between those two, leaving, going to Panama, not knowing what to expect, and then getting back on the plane, coming back to the States?
I remember distinctly returning back to New York, um, and going into the city and realizing just how vast Manhattan
Hmm.
is,
Mhm.
um, and one, how much we take for granted in the U.S., right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But two, um, how much happier people were in Panama,
Mhm.
right?
Mm.
So let me give a specific example. To this day, I still speak to one of my former students, right, who now has become a really close friend. His name is Julio Moreno, and Julio would rise in a area called San Carlos, which is sort of out in the rural area, several hours out of Panama City. He would rise super early in the morning. He would take a sort of a rickety bus several hours to get to Panama City, take his classes at the University of Panama throughout the day, then take that same bus to spend several hours to go back out, right? And he did that day in and day out, right? And his story reflected the stories of many of my students, and yet they were like so incredibly happy,
Hmm.
hilarious, really
Mhm.
funny, had a great outlook on life. And you come back, I come back to sort of the U.S. and New York in particular, and friends kind of complain about very,
Hmm.
very simple
Mhm.
things, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so it really made me realize that in many ways, the the outlook that other folks have um, in the world
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
is very positive, and I think it's something that Americans should really learn from others,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
To really cherish and value
Mhm.
the blessings that we have in this country, right? And not to sweat the small stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that is a very good lesson. And I think it's a lesson that a lot of us that have traveled overseas and come back see, the gratefulness of. I just think back to my time after coming back from the Philippines. I'm grateful for electricity,
Hmm.
grateful for I was just amazed that we had drainage systems on the roads. I mean,
Right.
that alone, the fact that I'm not having to go through all these huge puddles, it just makes you so grateful. Oh, I'm grateful for light. I'm grateful for this and that. And how can we, I think that's a really great reminder, Leland, like how can we pull some of that into our daily life, a spirit of gratefulness and of gratitude. And because we need more of it. So to sum it up, Leland, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Our students that are listening, say thank you as well for taking time out of your morning, away from your family and away from your busy schedule. Because guys, he just came back from Taiwan. This man, he like travels everywhere. He's on everybody's list just to come on the show and share your experience with us. So thank you so very much, Leland. And I hope you have a great rest of your morning.
Jerica, thank you so much.